Hello, welcome to Quackalope, and today we're giving you a how to play on Tabletop Simulator. Now, it's sort of an interesting thing to cover on a board game media channel, right? Tabletop Simulator is kind of adjacent to the board game culture and community as a whole, and different people have mixed feelings on it. But about 3 weeks ago, the world sort of changed a little bit, and I found myself doing what I had avoided for a couple years at that point, which was getting online to finally connect and play some board games with friends. Now, the question is, how do you do that? Well, we launched a Discord community that's now grown to about 750 people, where we have board games happening every single night. It's been absolutely incredible, and we'd love to have you join. We'll leave a link down in the description down below, and we will welcome you when you get there. But one of the things that we keep running into is people like me who had never played on Tabletop Simulator before, who had never really intended to play on Tabletop Simulator before, found ourselves needing to connect digitally to play the games that we wanted to play, right? All these boxes that I have sitting behind me, along with the publishers we wanted to connect with, the prototypes, and the different demos that we wanted to experience, and even some of the conventions we have coming up will revolve around a online community, a physics simulation engine that allows you to pick up pieces and move components and do everything you can in a physical state, but instead in a digital one. Now, there are barriers to entry when it comes to that, but they're not as broad or high-reaching as you'd assume. So, in our Discord community, like I said, about 3 weeks ago when we launched, I knew nearly nothing about Tabletop Simulator. Since then, I've probably played 20 or 25 games, and I am excited to dive into new titles across the board. Not only that, but my co-host, Jan, who now is about 8 or 9 hours away from me, has been able to connect with me, play games with me, prototype, and start working on a brand new podcast series because we can still play games together. Finally, I've been able to connect and play a wide mixture of games with designers, publishers, and more importantly, some of the fans of the show and some of the Patreons who've been supporting me for some time now. It's been an incredible way to not only meet people, but also connect with them. And one of them, who has walked me through the learning steps of the Discord community, of recording audio into my computer, of doing things like OBS to do screen capture, and finally, my, savant or my teacher when it comes to Tabletop Simulator, has been a young gentleman named Successful Geek, who I have over here in our Discord community at the moment. He's one of the moderators that'll welcome you there when you come join us, and he's also happy to answer any questions you have, or you can just @ me. I seem to be on there something like 12 hours a day doing my best to respond to people. So, the whole point of this video is, one, to get you excited to join our Discord community, to welcome you in and let you know that if you're missing the community you had, well, we're still out here. If you're looking for a new way to connect with people, a way to play games and remain kind of in this culture, come over and join us. Spend some time with us. We'd love to have you there, and it doesn't require any commitment beyond however often you want to pop in to play a game. That could be once a month. It could be once every week. It could be like Successful Geek, who I think I've seen on there nearly every single night. I mean, you've played like 30, 40 titles since we launched the Patreon,
Yeah.
And Jan has successfully spent 8 or so hours doing his best to teach other people how to play. The second part of this video, the thing that I want to emphasize, is that Tabletop Simulator shouldn't be something to avoid. It's not scary. It's actually a platform that, if you learn sort of the beginning steps, if you have people who are willing to teach you and walk you through it, it's an incredible way to connect and an incredible way to experience and engage with, the board games and the tabletop games we love, all the way from simple card games like Dale of Merchants to some of our favorite games here on the channel, Root, which is actually supported by kind of the Leader Games community, all the way up to games like Kingdom Death, the cornerstone of heavy big box games, where some of the scripting and mods actually, in some ways, facilitate maybe an easier gaming experience than breaking it all out onto your table. It's an answer a lot of people have been exploring long before the current state of things, and it's one that I think people are going to continue leaning into as we figure out how to continue connecting with this community. So this video is very specifically going to do everything we can to teach you how to get started, so that when you come over, you don't have to feel like you're asking every single question in the book, right? We're happy to answer questions. We're also happy to teach you games, and we'd love if you'd be willing to do the same, but we want to break down that barrier just a little bit. Get you sort of in the door, make you excited about the opportunity instead of dreading the concept of playing a board game on a computer. All that being said, I'm going to go ahead and cut over into this screen. Now, this is still a Quackalope video. That means we will be as highly produced as we possibly can be, cutting in between some screen captures, me sitting here in the studio on the camera, and more specifically, layering B-roll and doing our best to help communicate the things that we're talking about. We're not going to dive into TTS and take the time to walk you through a 50-minute video. That'll happen just because I'm talking more than average. Instead, we'll use examples from some of our favorite versions of games that we actively currently play in the community, to show you how mechanics and cards and key kind of commands work. Now, I've talked about the extent of my knowledge, so it is time for me to, well, first off, welcome the goose. Jan, thank you for being here.
Can I finally talk?
You can finally talk.
I don't remember being this quiet for months, honestly. It's a little bit eerie.
Yeah, you have a hard time staying quiet. That is true. Now, to be fair, you're just here because you were stubborn and you didn't want me to do a video without you. Successful Geek, or Adam, the person who has spent countless hours walking me through and now is taking time to actually teach our community. I think this is a strategy so that you don't have to teach people individually as often. Is that accurate?
Still happy to teach people because I usually learn new games that way anyways. But yeah, so I want to make it so it doesn't have to be me being there. We have some amazing teachers in our community, Cadius, Irene. There's some amazing people who've even created mods for Tabletop Simulator in our community, and it's so much fun to be there. But I want to make it so that you don't need one of us if you want to just start up with some friends and you want to take it away and get started right away. We're happy to play with you, and if I can schedule a game with you, I'm so in. Yeah. And I don't want to be the bottleneck for your gaming enjoyment.
No, and I don't want to be anyone's bottleneck. I've got enough bottlenecks on my own. The filming, the editing, the managing Jan's constant stress levels. Like, there's a whole degree of stuff that I'm doing my best to manage. So,
you're not really that off.
So Successful. Go ahead and set us up with the premise of what Tabletop Simulator it is. What can people expect when they get into that platform?
So Tabletop Simulator was originally created as kind of a physics emulator for VR, actually. It was originally created for virtual reality, where you could like put on goggles and you could play poker with friends over the internet, but actually have like holding a hand of cards and stuff. That was the original concept. And it's evolved into a entire board game creation platform. And so one of the first things you should know is it is a physics simulator. So if you like pick up a piece while you're messing around with stuff and you drop it, it falls. And so there is that in play. But the cool thing about that is it even enables dexterity type games where you can flick things around and move things, pick stuff up and throw it across the table, roll dice and things like that.
Now, when it comes to the games that exist on there, I know there's a scale or a ramping, right? Some are a little bit more complicated, don't have as much coding. Others have really been cared for by either publishers or the community specifically. Talk a little bit about how that process works, and if people are looking for one specific game, are they going to be able to find exactly what they're looking for?
Yeah. So when you first load up Tabletop Simulator, or even if you're just on the store page of Steam looking to get Tabletop Simulator, one of the things you're going to see right on the store page is a bunch of downloadable content or paid for game mods. And it's a great way to support the publisher because those are all official mods that are created by the publisher. They're usually well maintained and they're nice to use. And there's amazing games like Scythe and just there's a bunch of them that have come out that are really good versions of those games. However, you're not just limited to the games that you find in the DLC. There's an entire workshop that if you go into the Steam store and you go to the community hub, inside that community hub, one of the little tabs in there will actually be the workshop. And inside that workshop, you can find a bunch of both community created games and also just free games that are created by the publishers to promote their game, play test their game, and things like that.
Yeah, and so your experience when it comes to TTS, if you're in our Discord, we'll probably be playing games that are maybe broken in a little bit that we're confident going into. If you're just searching there on your own with your own local friend group, you might find kind of varying quality of life issues, right? And we're going to help you work through how to play those games that are probably going to be a little bit more friendly. Because that's ultimately the goal. And the examples that we're giving you, the games that we're showing, sort of our physical examples, will be good reference points or good starting points if you want to learn how to play something on TTS. Now, Jan, you were fairly new to TTS as well. What's your experience been?
Well, first of all, you're assuming I had some experience with TTS before, but not that much. Like, it's definitely been one of these experiences where I had been dreading going on to TTS because I had this misconstrued idea of what it was. I thought it was going to be really finicky and uncomfortable, and I wasn't going to experience games how I usually play them. And then I actually started playing, and I started finally, getting games that I might have never got into the table before. Worlds and worlds of different Kickstarter games and preview games, and just it's really actually expanded my reach for board games in general. So I've been actually very excited to get on TTS as much as possible lately.
Yeah, I think that's 100% the case for me as well. The opportunity to learn from, connect with not only the community, but publishers and playtest games. There's a lot of people utilizing this platform right now, and I don't think that's going to change significantly when our local game groups get back together. I think the stuff people are learning right now on TTS, the communities that are gathering, for the most part, they may slow down a bit, but I think they're still going to become active. I know our channel and our kind of the way we play games, Jan, this will be an integral part to that. So when you get started in TTS, there's going to be a few things that you will need to figure out. First off, you'll have to go to the Steam store or something equivalent and go ahead and get the application for Tabletop Simulator. Steam is a video game hosting site. If you're lost on that point, we've got a lot more work to do. The other things you want to pay attention to is, first off, a video or audio platform in order to engage with the people you're playing games with. Board games are still going to be really, really demanding when it comes to being able to just talk with and have a good way to connect with people. And so something like Discord, Skype, even Google Hangouts can be utilized as a way to set up kind of game groups and connect with your local gaming group. If you're looking for a broader span of games, then our Discord server is the thing that we're recommending, right? We have audio channels there, we have people who are teaching, and we have calendar events that allow you to see what games are coming up, see who's willing to teach a game, and even schedule your own games and invite other people to come be a part of them. The other things you want to keep in mind: you don't need a microphone like this. You also don't need headphones like this, but you will need a computer that is able to run some version of Tabletop Simulator, test out the specs, and see if you can keep things running effectively. You'll need a decent connection to the internet, especially since you're connecting with a bunch of people online. Having something like a hard line or fairly fast Wi-Fi will be an important element. And then some sort of headphone and microphone combination. It could be as simple as one of those little microphone cables that connects to earbuds, or as complicated as kind of a podcasting setup like I and Successful Geek have. It really goes a long way because you don't want to catch a lot of echo when you have kind of your computer blaring out a lot of sound. You also want to be able to silence things so that while you're playing, you can be respectful to the other people that are listening in as well. From that point, because that's, again, about the extent that I know, Successful, what are the next stages in terms of getting started in Tabletop Simulator?
I want to be clear. I don't have this amazing like microphone or anything just for Tabletop Simulator. I use this for work and stuff like that. So you definitely don't need anything like this. I just take advantage of it for when I'm communicating with you guys. I like to use the same mic because it's easy for me because I've set it up. And my story about how I discovered Tabletop Simulator is very similar to yours. When I first heard about it, I'm like, that sounds like a neat concept. I picked it up and I logged in and I was lost immediately. I'm like, wait, so you got to buy all the games? And then like, how do you load them in? And how do I pick up stuff and move stuff around? And I just had a lot of trouble. And it wasn't too like, I don't have that many more weeks of experience than you with Tabletop Simulator. Probably about a month before I started talking with you, actually, is when I first started diving into it, because I heard about Kingdom Death Monster and I really wanted to play it, but there was no way that I could justify. My wife wouldn't be interested in it. So I wanted to give it a try, and I found an online group that said, "Hey, I will teach you. Do you want to come on Tabletop Simulator?" I'm like, I can, but I don't know how to use Tabletop Simulator. And he brought me in, he showed me the basics, and that's when, like, when someone showed me, and that's kind of why we wanted to make this video. When someone showed me how, suddenly it clicked and it became a joy to use. And I saw the, like, just the possibilities open up of all the different community created mods, the games I can test and try out before I buy them. In physical format, because I'm still very much a physical board gamer, if at all possible.
I think the majority of us are.
Yeah, and this is just a great opportunity to connect with people remotely and play with them, and also again try out games that you're not sure about.
I mean, now that we've met, I certainly hope sometime in the next year or so we'll be able to convene at a convention or get together at a local FLGS and like play some games together. Like that would be incredible.
Yeah.
But until then, I hope we get to keep playing games every single week. And,
sure.
I wouldn't have been able to connect with or meet any of you across I mean, I have Leb, I have Nat, I have Cadis, I have you. Like, this community, my gaming community has expanded. It's remained the core that I had in DC, and now I have a bunch of other people I can hop onto games with and force to play with me as I prepare reviews, which is really the strategy. So someone has taken the time to get the equipment they need. They've downloaded Steam, they've downloaded Tabletop Simulator, and let's say they've pulled up something like the Root mod or the Dale of Merchants mod, right? They've went into the, what's that zone called specifically?
Workshop.
So you've gone to the workshop and you've picked a mod that you want to try out, and either once you have a mod, someone has to host it. So when I say host, that means that your computer will be where the game state lives, basically. And so everyone will connect to you if you're the host. And the way you do that is you click create, you type in a name for the server, you make sure you type a password, because if you don't type a password, random people will just come in and interrupt your game.
I had one dude pop in, and we were very confused why things froze for about 30 seconds, and then we saw everything on the table become supersized all at once. It was kind of funny, but we did learn the lesson: always password protect your games.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a complicated password or anything. Just one step of protection, you're good.
Yeah, something like Quack.
Yeah, Quack is a great password for it.
Paddle, goose, honk. All of the above.
From that point, they've started a game. They're hosting the game. They've set up a name for the server and a password. What are they going to do next to kind of get people into that game?
Yeah, so then you'll tell people who want to join what you've named a server and what the password is. And so when they first log into Tabletop Simulator, instead of clicking create, they'll click the join button. They click join. They can type in the name of what you told them. They'll make sure, because it lists the name of the server, it says the name of the game, and the Steam name of who's hosting it. So it's actually even easier to find if you're already friends on Steam, but that you don't have to be friends on Steam to play together, which is what's really cool about this and what makes it so easy to connect.
I think on our community, we usually do something like Quackalope. You can see that Successful Geek is the person that is hosting the game. So you hit join, you search the exact server name. It'll take a little bit for it to cycle through kind of the plethora of games that exist. And then you'll see Quackalope, Root, Successful Geek pop up. You'll click on join, you'll put in the password, whatever that is, could be something like honk, and then you will swing into the game. So once they're in the environment of TTS, let's start with one of the simpler games we're going to be showing off here. Let's start with Dale of Merchants. What is the environment going to be like? What are they going to start doing to actually physically move around and interact with the game state?
So when you first get in there, one of the first things you're going to want to do is what's called take a seat. And you take a seat by changing your color. So even if you're the host, you still need to set your color. So you'll click on your name in the upper right-hand corner. You'll click the little drop down that says change color, and you'll actually see like spots around the table, and each one will be color coded, and you just click on it, and now that becomes your seat. So you are represented by that color, and your little hand that shows around when you move your mouse around will become that color as well. So that way people can see whose hand is on what. Now that you've taken your seat or selected your color, it's time to start moving around a space, controlling the camera with your mouse and keyboard. And so some of the basic camera controls will be W, A, S, and D, which W moves you forward, S moves you back, and because this is a 3D environment, so you're going to be moving in a 3D space. You can also hold right click to, as you hold right click and you move your mouse, it'll rotate the camera. You can use your mouse wheel to zoom in and out. And there's other various keys that I'll talk about in a little bit that are a little more advanced. But those are kind of the core ones you need to know first. The other one that's really important is the Alt key on your keyboard or Option key on a Mac. It lets you move basically what you do is you move your mouse over something you want to take a closer look at. You hold the Alt key or Option key on Mac, and it'll zoom that specific thing in, so that way you can read it or see more details about what that is.
And let's be clear with what this means. So, in the real world where maybe somebody has a particular player board, maybe asymmetric, and you have no idea what's going on, it's kind of awkward to ask them, hey, can you pass that over so I can just read on it a little bit and understand what you're doing? With that Alt key, you're able to get that in your face immediately to understand the context of what's going on. You're able to see a card that's on the edge of a table. You're able to jump immediately to the tableau or to the center of the board to see what somebody just put down. You're even able to take a look, if you need it, of your cards right up your face. And it just works so wonderfully well. And another thing that you have to understand is that these mods have a lot of work put into them. We're not talking about a mod in the sense that, oh, it's going to be subpar artwork and all that. You're going to see the actual board game in its entirety, beautifully rendered, and everything is clear as day. So really, I feel that Alt key, I wish I just had that in real life.
That
honestly
transformed the gameplay experience for me. If I'm going to be honest, discovering, because the first time I got in, I was physically using the WASD keys and the arrow directional keys to float around the board and zoom in on a specific point. And then finally I asked the question, I wish there was a way that I could just zoom in, or how do I flip this board over, or how do I see the other side of this card that I just put down? And it turns out, well, that exists. All I had to do was ask the question. And it really does make the usability factor of the TTS mod. If you don't learn anything else from this video, that one trick alone will scale your experience. So from that point, there's also the element of holding the shift key, right? Successful?
Yes. Yeah. So you just touched on that a little bit. You mentioned, how do I look at the back of something, especially if you need to peek at something, because everyone can see everything on the table, right? If you need to peek behind someone without letting someone else know, what you can do is you hold the Alt key to zoom in on it, and then you hold the Shift key as well. So you hold Alt Shift or Option Shift on a Mac, and that will let you peek behind the card. Now, the other interesting thing about that, it will actually put your colored like a magnifying glass on it, or like a little eyeball to let people know that you're peeking behind that card. So that way you can catch if someone's trying to cheat by doing that. So it's kind of nice that it gives that little indicator.
And that's really important, because in something like Dale of Merchants, you can zoom into a card, or you can check something that's been kind of hidden in your hand, right? If you place something down for someone to randomly select. Or in Root, for instance, the back of the boards are really important in Root. So not only do you sometimes have hidden information or hidden cards or hidden tokens, but you also need to flip those boards over without spilling all the pieces off of them, figure out your lore, your flavor text — this is still a Quackalope video — and your setup guidelines, and then you can, build the board and get everything stabilized. It just allows you to see both sides. So we're showing examples of that kind of as we're talking. So once they've mastered moving around the board, floating around, and looking at objects closer, what are some of the next skills people should learn?
Skills you should really learn is, now that you know how to control yourself, like where you are, it's interacting with the different elements that are on the board. It's picking up things, moving them around, and usually you'll just do that by clicking on something, like you'll left click on it. That picks it up while you're holding it, and you can move it over and drop it down. And remember, this is a physics engine, so if you hold left click, pick it up, and fling it and let go, it will make like a card or a dice fly, that's part of the whole interesting pieces about like dice and stuff. You can fling dice, and they'll actually roll and bounce across the table.
Now, I remember specifically when I was playing some of our first Root games with Jan, he had a habit of rolling dice across the center of the root board. Jan, can you tell me how Leader Games taught you to roll dice from that point on? Or interact with other objects like shuffle cards, roll dice, some of the core board game mechanics?
So Tabletop Simulator does a lot of things to reduce fiddliness, right? Because the first thing that you'll probably think of is like, oh, I have to draw every single card with my mouse. I'm going to have to shake my mouse in order to throw a die. No, not necessarily. There's actually hotkeys. There's so many little different things that you're going to be able to take advantage of. For example, you want to throw a dice. Maybe you want to throw 4 dice. Maybe you want to throw 2 dice and something a little bit different. You can do that with just pressing your R key. By pressing the R key, that's going to automatically give you a completely randomized result. And if you're extremely anxious like I am, you'll probably press that R key maybe 4 to 5 times when you only needed to press it once. That's key here, okay? So for example, imagine in Root, instead of having an entire area of a table dedicated to rolling a dice, you can dedicate this space to just throw those dice in the air and let them fall, and you get a result. For cards, it's going to be very similar. Let's say that you have to update a round, or maybe you're playing a deck builder and you just depleted your deck. It's time that, you get everything ready. Real life, got to shuffle a little bit. You got to do some time. It's going to take 30, 40 seconds. Not here. All you have to do is press the R key again. So you select the deck and you press that R key, and you'll see all the cards immediately shuffle on top of each other, and you'll get a randomized deck.
And the really nice thing is you don't even have to click on the deck or the dice or anything. You can just move your cursor over it. You press the R key and it does it for you. You don't have to pick it up or anything. You can just roll it by moving your mouse over it and pressing that R key.
Now, along the lines of interacting with some of those pieces on the board, right? We've been over rolling dice and shuffling cards, 2 core features of the board game world. You can also draw cards, either by quickly grabbing and taking a card off the top of the deck, or hitting your number keys, your 1, 2, 3, and scaled up, to draw cards directly into your hand as long as there's a hand location in the game you're playing. Finally, there's a few other key mechanics. If you click for an extended period of time on a deck of cards, it'll pick up the entire stack. That's true for anything that locks together. And then if you use the Q and E keys, the keys that are next to the keys that you're using to move around the board, those will help you rotate objects just to make sure that things are facing the correct direction or look decent and fit properly into a tabletop environment.
And one thing that I'd like to make super clear here that I don't think we touched on before that particular line is that a hand in Tabletop Simulator is actually going to be at the very bottom of your screen. So usually if you ever drag a set of cards or maybe some meeples and objects, it depends on the mod, you'll immediately get kind of like everything right at the bottom. And that's completely hidden, depending on the mod, of all other players. So when Jesse says you'll press those keys and things will start flowing into your hand, it's always referring to that bottom portion of your screen. And one of the coolest thing is that when you press that 6 key, all those cards immediately flush into that portion. And depending on the mod, you might even be able to see them on the board physically. And remember that Alt key? You're going to be able to reference it there. You're going to be able to reference on the board and everywhere that you can too. So it's really, really neat.
And then the last thing we really need to touch on when it comes to interacting with items on the game board is going to be the F key. And there are other hotkeys that you need to probably learn, and you'll learn those through playing the games, but this will get you in the door and comfortable with moving around the environment. The F key is going to flip cards over. They're going to either hide them from other people, expose them to other people, or potentially just cycle an entire deck. So if you have a discard pile, flip everything in that deck over, shuffle it, stick it back into your draw zone, and you're ready to go again.
Yeah, one of the other things you can use the flip function with is you can use it on miniatures and meeple to indicate that it's been knocked over, or just some other state to indicate on the board, like in a physical presence, that it's different. And another thing you can actually do is you can also click and drag to select multiple things. So if you click on just somewhere in the table in general and you like drag to highlight a bunch of things, you can shuffle them all together. If you got cards spread around, you can flip multiple things at once, and you can control multiple things at once by highlighting multiple things.
So we've started talking and touching on some elements that maybe in some ways are a little bit more advanced or a little bit more particular to mods themselves. And we figured one of the best ways to show off and celebrate TTS is to show off some of the games that our community has not only been involved in crafting, but also play a lot. If you show up any week of the month, I mean, you're going to find some people getting into these games, or find instructors teaching them, or me just hosting and losing perpetually. So
They just love Monopoly so much.
yeah, that's the one we're touching on. So let's go ahead and dive into 3 core games that really our community enjoys a lot on TTS. First is going to be Dale of Merchants. We're going to show some examples, some highlights of what that is like on TTS. Then we're going to touch on Root. And finally, the big box behemoth itself, Kingdom Death. So starting here with Dale of Merchants, Successful.
So Dale of Merchants is my new favorite. I've only been playing it for a week, but it is my new favorite to introduce new players into Tabletop Simulator, because it's really well designed by a community member named Irene.
He's
did
incredible.
a fantastic job on making the mod. And the amazing thing is Sami from Snowdale Designs actually is in the community as well, and he provided all the assets, so it's an official mod.
About a week ago, he popped in and said, and we were asking, he's like, some of our stuff's on there, we don't really know what's functioning. And Irene spoke up and he's like, hey, if you get me the assets, we can make something nice for you. And boy, did he.
It turned out really good, really fast.
So let's talk about the stuff that we'll find when we get into Dale of Merchants. What are some of the ease of life things that exist there? And then what does a turn look like? What are the skills that we've already taught people that we can utilize when playing in Dale of Merchants?
So some of the core things in Dale of Merchants that you may or may not know about Dale of Merchants in particular is it's a deck builder. So you're going to need different decks of cards to play with. Depending on the number of players. So you're going to take seats at those individual spots on the table, up to 4 seats. And you'll see right in the middle, there's a market, but then over on the right side of the screen, if you like pan your camera over, you'll actually see a listing of all the different animal folk that are part of Dale of Merchants. And all you have to do to add decks to be in part of this deck building game is you click on the name or the like little flag of that animal folk, and it adds the deck right into the game. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your seat, pick out the animals you want to play with, and then you click Start Game. So all you have to do is press the Start button, and it does everything for you to get set up. It's super easy to get started, and then it does the things that we've just been talking about. So, for example, Jan was talking about bringing cards into your hand. It puts cards into your hand right away. As part of the game, you're going to play cards from your hand onto the table. Then you'll move those cards from the table, from one part of the table into a discard pile, and it just snaps in place. Once your main deck that you have over on the left side, you got your discard pile on the right side. Once that deck is empty, you'll flip the discard pile over, drag it back over on top of the deck area, and you'll press R 1 or 2 times to shuffle that deck, and you're ready to go again.
And then another element that's been done here, some of the scripting behind the scenes to make it a really nice play experience, is as you've kind of drawn up from that market or discarded cards from the market, you can actually hit a nice little button there that says fill the market. Now, other games will have similar icons or cues, some of them more easily to see, some of them a little bit more hidden, but they'll do things behind the scenes. So in this case, if you hit that button, your market will shift down like it's supposed to, and then cards from the market deck will fill out that space. That's really important. It means you don't have to physically go in, pick up items, and move them down. So that's going to be card play, right? Dale of Merchants is going to get you into the system and really show off the physical elements of the game. Let's go into something a little bit more complicated when it comes to simulating a play environment. Let's talk about getting into a game like Root by Leader Games, who've actually, their team has came over and done interviews and taught us how to play some of their games, so that's been absolutely incredible. Big shout out to them. But Successful, go ahead and walk us through the beginning stages there and some of the differences we'll see moving from a intro card game to a slightly more heavier or mid-weight physics game that requires physical manipulation.
Different games are going to have different requirements. So one of the things in Root is picking the faction you want to play as. Who do you want to play as? And there will be actually really nice boards that are spread around in the different seating positions that you can pick that faction. Now, the way Root is designed is when you pick your color, you kind of need to pick your color for the faction you want to take, because if someone picks a faction in one specific location and you happen to be that color, all of a sudden you're sitting in that location. So This particular mod is a little bit backwards, and usually you'll pick your color before you start anything. In this mod, it actually tells you, there's a little note on the side of the screen, which is kind of nice, that you can reference, okay, here's the order of things I need to do in. I pick my faction, then I choose my color to take my seat as that faction. Then once everyone's picked their factions, then you'll pick your map. And once you pick your map, it sets everything up for you. And of course, this has the meeple and stuff simulated in it. It's got a little bag full of meeple that you can pull things out of. You have your hand to pull cards into.
And we all know that Root is a game that has a lot of pieces, right? So one of
That's
the things
dangerous
that this
for a
mod
physics engine.
Exactly. So one of the things that this mod does in order to reduce that clutter or all that at the same time is that they have what's called kind of like an infinite bag. You're going to have different pouches all across the table that are going to hold maybe the meeples of the otters, or maybe the meeples of the Erie, or just whatever meeples or whatever tokens are multiples of. And the idea of this is that sometimes they're going to be limited in quantity because you're supposed to have a limited quantity, and other times it's going to be an infinite amount of tokens. So you'll be able to drag your cursor or your hand on top of that bag and take out as much or as little as you want. And remember when we said that you could press your numbers key and all that, that still also applies to these small little bags. Also, Root is a game where you're going to have to reveal certain cards, and you're going to have to do certain things. Maybe not everything is supposed to be public knowledge. So we talked about flipping objects or flipping cards. This is a game where you're going to have to do that, and that was going to be with our F key, right? So if you place down a card, you don't want anybody to look at it, you can either do one or two things. You could potentially flip the card from your hand, right? The hand that you're going to have in the bottom portion of your screen before you drag it out, so that no one can even have a small glimpse of what you're putting on that table. And the last thing, and I think it's pretty pivotal in Root, you're probably
I don't know
gonna
why
need,
you'd think that. I don't even know why you'd mention that.
you're probably going to need the law of Root somewhere where you can access it. And guess what? It's going to be right there on the table. And because of the scripting that was done in this particular mod, it's going to kind of work like a PDF viewer. They're going to be able to click on certain areas, and that's going to pass the page. And then you'll use your Alt key to zoom in into that page. And the nice thing is that you don't need multiple copies of the rule book for everybody to reference it, because everybody can just look through the rule book themselves at the same time in case they don't believe what you're reading to them.
Now,
which happens often.
This does bring up an important thing when it comes to playing on Tabletop Simulator. I always try to math out an extra probably 30% versus a physical game to playing on TTS, right? It just does take a little bit longer. You know, you're still communicating in sort of this abstract space, and so it's different from sitting directly across from each other. With a game like Root, that we have teaching games in our Discord where we take the time necessary to teach 3 or 4 or 5 people at a time how to run through it. And usually I or Successful or one of our other members is actually running it as a DM. So moving people through quickly, reading through the boards, getting them used to play, because we want as many people playing this game as possible. We just really love it. If I have 872 people willing to play Root in my channel, that's perfect for me. That means I can always hop into a game. But the other element that is going to be important, especially if you're playing a game you've never played before, take the time to find a PDF viewer to get into the TTS mod itself, where almost every game should have a rulebook there for you to examine, or watch a video on our channel or any of the other incredible how to play channels and other tabletop kind of community channels here on YouTube, and find out at least the core structure of how to play a game. Even if you have a teacher, it's going to reduce that barrier to entry. It's going to let you figure out TTS instead of figuring out both the rules to a game and TTS. And then finally, it'll help mediate that 30% that even with an experienced game, I still always try to factor in when I'm joining something. So that is the setup for Root. right? It displays a lot of really interesting things, picking up meeples, moving them across the board, rolling those dice in a controlled position so that you don't scatter them across this place where you have so many little tokens, flipping cards to make sure you have hidden information or so you can look at the back of your board for your setup guidelines and your flavor text, having an accessible rulebook that everyone can scan through and read, and then finally doing things like having a bag so that you can keep the chaos a little bit more managed. Let's move on to a game that, no matter how hard you try, the chaos and the darkness will never quite be managed. Now, Kingdom Death is an interesting game for us to introduce in, I think, two specific ways. First off, it is the biggest, probably, game that we know of that exists on TTS. But there's other ones as well. There's Gloomhaven and Madara and Seventh Continent and some really beautiful big box games that run really well on TTS. Kingdom Death, however, is unique from the other two mods that we're touching on because it's actually entirely created by the fans, and there's a plethora of different options and ways to try to experience this game as the community has tried to solve the problem of online play. Unlike Dale of Merchants and Leader Games with Root, the behind the scenes, the admins or the designers of Kingdom Death haven't actually given direct permission or provided direct assets for this mod to exist. Now, you'll find that is part of this weird mixture of Tabletop Simulator, this odd display of official, non-official, semi-official mods. Kingdom Death is an interesting one and worth touching on, whereas Gloomhaven and Madara are a little bit more official and a little bit more friendly to get into. Kingdom Death is going to be one that's probably the most complicated in a few different ways. Successful setup, the struggle people will find when they go to workshop and start searching for Kingdom Death, and then let's walk through some of the things that the mod we're familiar with does in a really interesting way so we can show off what a well-functioning and well-designed community mod can actually do.
Yeah. So, as you well know, Kingdom Death is a sprawling game. The number of pieces that you have to have out between the settlement and the showdown and the hunt and the rulebook and just everything. So, when you go into that into any Kingdom Death mod, it's all going to be all over the place. So if you aren't familiar with the game, it's very, very intimidating, let alone if you're new to Tabletop Simulator, because there's a lot to learn. So there are a bunch of mods. If you search for Kingdom Death in the workshop, there are a ton of mods, including people who just created mods where they just liked a miniature and they 3D modeled it and turned it into a mod to use in games and stuff, such as a duck to bring into any game they play. And then there are some mods that are better than others, where it's not just so sprawling, but maybe some scripting help to help automate some of the pieces of the game to make it a little bit more accessible. But even then, I would not have been able to learn how to use that mod without someone first showing me. And we've created a video kind of off the cuff on, hey, here's how to use this mod to help other members in our community to learn how to play that game in specific.
Yeah, that's a good time to point out that if you've made it to this part, it means you're probably going to come join us. Well, I have a link down below where not only you can join the Discord and we can teach you, but I've also included links to places where on a separate channel, a second Quackalope adjacent channel, I've posted gameplay of Root, I've posted gameplay of Dale of Merchants, and Successful and I have done a full hour-long breakdown of Kingdom Death and how to get started in that mod to teach people, to teach people who I wanted to play Kingdom Death with. It was entirely selfish, but you get to benefit from it.
Yeah, for sure.
So when you start digging into KDM or any of these mods that have a lot of fan creations, you'll probably have to do some digging to find one that operates well. Once you've stumbled across that, in our case, one that Successful thinks works really well, what are some of the features that we can very quickly, in the next 60 seconds or so, display about that mod that really highlights what this platform can do?
Yeah. So the first feature that I like is how it's a little finicky at first, but once you get the hang of it, how easy it is to control your characters, and as far as like the character sheets, what's on them, what's in their gear grid and things like that. It's got a really nice layout for that, and keeping track of what disorders you have, what fighting arts you might have throughout the game, things like that. So it's really nicely organized for that part of the game. The next part that I love is any quarries that you're going to hunt or fight in a showdown. All you do is you take the figure for that, and at the very top of the mod, there's two little areas. You put it in this one spot right here, and suddenly your hunt board is all set up for you. And then as soon as you move it to the next spot, suddenly the showdown board gets all set up with everything in position, including the terrain and everything for you. So it really automates a lot of that for you.
A beautiful example of how scripting and sort of coding behind the scenes can make something just easy to use. That is the quickest. It is quicker than me setting up Kingdom Death on my table, which is pretty incredible. The other feature here in Kingdom Death that's going to be important is going to be one we haven't touched on. It's a more advanced mechanic, and it's going to be searching. So when you're going to things like your gear grids, your personal decks, your disorder decks, you can actually right-click on them. A little menu will pop down, and you'll see a little icon that says search with a magnifying glass. That'll show you every card that exists in that collection, allowing you to draw one card out at a time. Now, in the earlier games, it's usually not a big thing. You can usually hunt through and find things a little bit more efficiently and effectively. In Kingdom Death, you absolutely need it, and they've designed it in a way with stacks of cards all over the place that allow you to do just that and use that feature.
And another thing about those stacks and cards is that if you hover your mouse on top of them a little while, you're also going to get text that defines what that stack is. And they've done an excellent job in categorizing everything so that when you do press search, you're pressing search in the right place.
So we won't dive into a how to play on KDM. We just wanted to show off one of our favorite games actually working and functioning in a system where, if you asked most people, it probably shouldn't work. Right? And designed by the fan community. We wanted to give some love to the people who've gone there before us and taken the time to make something kind of that remarkable. The last feature that it's important on a game like Kingdom Death successful is going to be a little thing called save.
Yes. That's actually very important in any campaign game you might play in Tabletop Simulator, because you're going to play multiple times and you need to save the current state of the board. And so the way you do that is at the top of your screen, you'll see an icon that says game. You'll click on that, and that's where, of course, you can access other mods, other DLCs. But then at the bottom, you'll see save and load. All you do is you click the save and load button, and then you'll click create, and then you can give it a name, and suddenly you have a save that you can reload and play again later.
Yeah, so that's going to be a core feature. So if you've made it to this point in the video, I mean, it's been a little bit of a long video, right? We've gone over a lot of things, and we really just wanted to give as much as we could to, I don't think 20,000 people are going to watch this and come join and benefit from it. Really, the goal here was for the 50 that made it to this point. Come hang out. Seriously, we'd love to have you there as part of our community, playing games with us. That's the whole point of this, to talk another few people into spending evenings doing what we all love and kind of connecting and being a part of this cool space. So, if you made it to this point, thank you so much for watching. I am excited to play a game with you. I know Jan and Adam here are both equally as excited. We welcome you over in the paddle. Hopefully this has been informative. Hopefully you've benefited from it. Jan, thank you for joining us. Thank you for having your little bit of insight. And Adam, our successful geek, really the sort of the owner of the Discord server, despite the fact that it calls me admin. Thank you so much, not only for taking the time to do this, but also just the way you've helped craft and moderate and build the community over there.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been fun.
Dude, everything that exists there, yeah, I mean, it's been incredible. It's a community that I needed, genuinely. Like, this space is a space that I really, really needed. And it would not exist if it was just me doing my very best to scratch it, out of existence. And so I know there's other people to thank, right? We have other admins, and we have publishers that are being a part of it. But since I have you here, I figured I'd say thank you to you as well. all of you that are still watching this gently romantic moment, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being a part of the community here. We all really genuinely appreciate you hanging out, watching this content, and hopefully this will help you play some more games. So, whatever they do, Jan.
Remember to do the important thing.
Success will take it away.
Get out there and play some games.
We'll see you next time. Thank you.